Now, I'd like to ask you a question really regarding AI people and organizational change. So let me pick your brain here for a minute.
Sure.
And so relating to your video about Ray Kurzweil, and we'll put this link in our show notes for our listeners. The Ray Kurzweil had a prediction of biological immortality and its implications. So let's bring it back to AI's potential role in organizational change for a moment. So
hmm
you state in this video that, quote, compounding returns and that it is nearly impossible to accurately predict how new technologies will recombine, specifically AI, nanotech, genetics, quantum computing, and other scientific breakthroughs will almost certainly combine in unexpected ways and therefore have rather profound effect or impact on people and certainly in our field, Nestell Associates field of work, organizational change. You then alluded to the iPhone as an example. So,
hmm
when you think of the impact from more of a social perspective, how could advancements in AI catalyze organizational change in merger and acquisition environments, for example? Any thoughts? Put you on the spot with a question like that, but what would you say about that?
Yeah. Well, first, to address the technological and scientific aspect, certainly there's going to be new products and services that are coming. Entirely new categories, right? This is where the tech industry is right now. Is they're obsessed with creating new categories of goods and services and products, all built around generative AI. Now, with that being said, there's plenty of brick and mortar businesses out there. Some of my clients, they do parts or they do hospitality, right? Where, they might not be subject to AI because, say, for instance, you travel to Singapore. Even if you maximize the amount of AI and robotics, you still need a hotel, right? You still need a
Yeah,
pool. You
right.
still need, there's some things that aren't going to change. At the same time, some industries, some sectors, there's a lot that can change. There's a few things that I kind of predict may happen to some sectors. That is, in some cases, I predict that the margins are going to become so narrow, the industries are not going to be able to survive as they are today. And so, what I mean by that is, in the cases of organizations or sectors that are primarily providing services that can be done electronically, the amount of reduction of cost that generative AI is capable of producing, you're not looking at shaving off 5% or 10%. You're looking at cost reduction of 10x to 1000x of some services. And in those cases, the margins just get too narrow and the products or services are going to get absorbed by other organizations or other entities. In those cases, those might be targets for acquisitions as the margins collapse. Some services might also be moved and provided at the municipal level. So, for instance, I wouldn't be surprised if healthcare, as some of these technologies recombine and drive down the cost of healthcare, it might not be viable for them to be for-profit services anymore. So it's going to vary a lot sector to sector. And of course, there's probably going to be some new sectors. I was just listening to some podcasts from the industrial side and the way that people are expecting things to go with industrial robotics, humanoid robotics, kind of displacing factory workers. That's going to create an entirely new demand for people building, maintaining, and programming humanoid robots. At the same time, what happens to those human workers? And there's a lot of questions that are kind of still up in the air. And as I did mention in that video, it is very difficult to predict exactly what's going to happen. So it's kind of keep your ear to the ground and keep your
Yeah.
eyes open to see what's coming down the pipeline.
It's the wild frontier. It's absolutely amazing to me and exciting, I guess, to see where this goes for that very
hmm
reason. David, we talked about this idea of frameworks, but what strategies should businesses adapt to in order to manage changes that come with AI implementation? Can you share with our listeners anything specific along the strategic lines on how to manage through these changes that you just referred to when it comes to AI implementation within an organization?
Yeah, so this is where we can kind of dive into the crawl, walk, run, fly model. So the crawl, walk, run, fly model comes typically more from within the technology stack. So anytime you're implementing or experimenting with a new technology or discipline, it's kind of this mentality of when you first get started with something, you're not going to know what you're doing. You're going to fall down a lot, just like toddlers learning to walk, right? You fall down, you bump your head, it hurts, you learn, and you move on. And so this crawl, walk, run, fly model is the first thing that companies need to do, and this is companies, this is individuals in the company, is first overcome the fear and demystify this technology, because like any big, gigantic, sudden change, it is overwhelming. It is scary. There's unknown unknowns. And so the crawl phase of this model is just get your hands dirty, right? Go play with it. Create environments for yourself and your employees that there's no risk of failure. So here's an example from when I was participating in a startup. Is I was, years and years ahead of some of the younger guys, and I was teaching them how to get their feet wet with the generative AI techniques and implementation strategies. And one of the younger guys, he just completely froze up, because he's like, well, but I don't know how to do this, and Dave knows infinitely more than I do. And I told him, I was like, I know you're going to mess up. I know you're going to fail. The point is to learn, not to produce, on day one. There's all kinds of ways that companies can address this. You can do hackathons, you can do competitions, you can just do it for fun, right? Like, do something that is completely unrelated to your business. Like, who can come up with the funniest story, right, with Chat GPT, something like that, just so that you get used to these new technologies and you start to build an intuition. So that's the crawl phase. The walk phase is when you start to actually do some prototyping. You create a POC or an MVP or a pilot program, and you don't necessarily have to build these things internally either. There's more software as a service and off-the-shelf white box products and services available today. But the idea is you do have to actively experiment. And that means with experimentation, you will still fail. You will say, like, well, we thought we were going to use, Bing Enterprise or Perplexity or whatever, and we didn't get the value from it. Okay, cool. If it doesn't work, let it go, try something else. But the idea is, I got this from Franklin Roosevelt, actually, is by God, just try something, right? Just keep trying something until it works. Yeah. And so that's the walk phase. And then once you get the first thing that really works, that really adds value, and when you know that it's really adding value when people suddenly can't live without it, right? It's like, well, you gave me this new toy and you said that we're not going to pay for it anymore, but it's really going to hurt my workflow. Yeah. That's how you know that it's really kind of stuck the landing, or you at least found a niche. And then the run phase is where you start to operationalize that. You say, okay, cool. We found the first thing that works. Let's find the second thing that works. Let's deploy it as broadly as we can across the entire organization and really aim for saturation. And that's going to be a more kind of conventional approach from an ERP perspective. And then finally, the fly phase. And this is kind of optional depending on the particular sector or business. But this is where you create a center of excellence around generative AI. In creating a center of excellence will absolutely be necessary for some organizations because it's going to change their entire industry. Like I said, for some, like hotel chains, probably isn't going to change that much. But if you're a law firm or an insurance company, you probably absolutely will need a center of excellence because of just how fundamentally AI is going to change your business. So that's the crawl, walk, run, fly model at a kind of 30,000 foot view.
Well, interesting. David, what we do know is that corporate culture is crucial to ERP organizational change success. Could the emergence of new tech domains and markets due to AI influence corporate culture and employee engagement? So for example, you mentioned earlier this idea of humanoid robots, or maybe not quite that extreme, maybe even just, the current deployment of Chat GPT. Do you have any comments or thoughts on how just AI in general can or is or will impact this idea of corporate culture, which is the interaction of people, right?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts there? I mean, corporate culture is a big part of what we do. And it's a huge part of the success of what we call, very deliberately, we don't call it ERP implementation. We call it ERP organizational change, because it definitely takes that triad, right? The people, process, and technology. And I know that can seem a bit cliche-ish, but it's true. And, corporate culture and leadership is a huge part of successful implementation of that technology and utilization and optimization of that technology. Any general comments as far as, due to the AI influence, what could corporate culture look like, or how could it be changed?
Yeah, so there's a few conversations that I'm aware of that are happening particular to culture. So many entrepreneurs that are kind of hard charging, blazing the trails for others. One of the things that they say is that they have no intention of laying off any employees if they can avoid it, because this is of course where you're going to get a lot of fear in the company culture. And certainly having worked at several companies going through major transitions, some people will react with fear and kind of clam up or kind of throw up their walls and defenses. And that just makes work less pleasant for everyone. But what some of these entrepreneurs and business leaders are saying is they have every intention of keeping every employee, but the expectation is that they will invest time in learning and mastering these new technologies. And so, from a culture perspective, the thing that I hope to see is, the concept of BS jobs going away, right? Like, if you have to have today, there are jobs that humans have to do just because machines can't do them, but they might be boring, they might be unfulfilling, they might be kind of mundane. But the thing is humans are smart. Like, we're the smartest animal on the planet. And so nobody really deeply enjoys kind of a menial job. Some people like, the low stakes and the low pressure. That's fine. But we are intrinsically curious and creative animals. And what I hope will happen is that people will see that AI, even though it probably will dislocate some jobs, it will get us away from kind of the drudgery and allow us to move more towards really using our creativity and our executive function and our problem solving. Now, that's kind of pie in the sky. That's the hope and dream, right? If I were still working a corporate job, I would be using all the AI tools that I could to automate as much as I could of my job. And I would find that fascinating and fun. And like, hey, can I automate an entire department? I can be the man behind the curtains, pay no attention to me. I'm just running all the autonomous gizmos. Now, on a more practical level, I think that generative AI is going to help with things like training and communication, probably first, because generative AI tools like ChatGPT, they can read huge volumes of information, but then they can also train you, or maybe not even train you, but like just kind of be a co-pilot in terms of writing emails and writing Slack messages and planning meetings. And so by having this kind of cognitive co-pilot, this is the term from Psychology Today, actually, an article that came out last week. By having and deploying these cognitive co-pilots, it can really increase the emotional intelligence and communication skills for everyone. And that alone will probably have a pretty profound impact on corporate culture in the long run. But again, you have to get people using these tools. So, I mean, there's a million different little ways that generative AI could either directly or indirectly influence corporate culture.